So I Googled Joker quotes. I Googled Joker quotes. 150, it's parade.com, 150 Joker quotes to make you appreciate the madness and put a smile on that face.
I'm sorry, is this a part of the podcast?
Yeah,
Okay.
no, podcast has started.
Okay, great. Go.
What do you think the first Joker quote is? What do you think number one is?
I'm assuming because you're asking and you're laughing, it isn't Why So Serious.
No, it is Why So
Okay,
Serious.
great.
Of course, it's the first one. What do you think the number two Joker quote is?
You want to know how I got these scars?
Nope.
Oh, is it I'm the Joker?
Basically, it's... I mean, when did it come out? 2019? I haven't seen
Which
it.
one? I don't know which
then.
Joker we're discussing.
The Joker, the movie Joker.
Okay,
It's the Joaquin Phoenix Joker. I don't remember him saying this in that movie. I remember the part where he says, call me Joker. Where he says, drop the it's cleaner. And he says, call me Joker. I don't remember the part where he says, not clown, Joker. Why so serious? You want to know how I got these? What if in Joker 2 he says, why so serious? We haven't considered that.
We have not considered that.
What if Lady Gaga playing Dr. Harleen Quinzel comes up to the bars of his cell and the first thing he says to her is, why so serious?
You know, what if truly
I'd be forced to give it 5 stars.
Joker 2, a bad movie, probably, who's to say. That bad movie is coming out soon, and so we are using that to discuss a good movie, which is a film that Carson hasn't seen, which is Martin Scorsese's The King of Comedy. Let's just get into it. I'm your co-host, Caroline Thompson.
I'm your co-host. I'm the Joker now, and my name is Carson Betts.
And this is How You Not Seen, a movie podcast where each week we pick one of our favorite movies that the other hasn't seen.
We talk about
it. We go and watch the movie.
We're gonna talk about it some more. It's gonna be so funny. We're gonna laugh.
Yes. Carson, this is a question that I think I know the answer to, but I actually don't. Have you ever tried stand-up comedy?
No.
Okay.
I'd become too powerful. I'd become too much of I already do, Caroline. I already do so much long form improv.
I was going to say, you've gotten really back into it in a way that seems like you guys are doing really well.
Yeah.
It seems like
we are.
Your troupe is really succeeding and doing some cool shit.
We are traveling a lot. We are doing a lot of out of town shows. We are actually, I think we are finding some very great stuff. I cannot also be a stand-up comic guy, or I don't think a woman will ever touch me ever again for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
I just think that's where we're at right now. So I have to be careful.
I think that's very fair.
Tell me something.
Yes.
Caroline, have you ever danced with the devil in the pale moonlight?
You know, I gotta say, only the once, and I didn't know who it was when it happened, in my defense.
Oh, well, it was the devil.
It was the devil, as
it turns
out.
To
be clear, I thought it was just a strange fellow challenging me to a fiddling contest. I didn't realize at the time. Carson, yeah. I'm really glad you haven't, because it means we get to talk about it on this podcast. But how have you not seen The King of Comedy?
That is a very good question. So it did not happen for a number of reasons, but we were talking at length about doing a Scorsese themed Patreon series. And in talking about that, I realized, I've seen probably certainly the majority of his filmography, but I have not seen every Martin Scorsese movie.
Mm-hmm.
The's a lot I got to catch up on.
Mans is, for a guy who does take several years off in between films and does take his time, he's been making movies every couple years for 50 years.
So prolific. So yeah, I just haven't seen this one. I just never got to it. I know the reason we're talking about the Joker, if people are not aware of the joke that we're making, the joke. It is, Todd would tell you that the Joker is very influenced by Scorsese, and particularly The King of Comedy.
Correct.
And Taxi Driver. Taxi Driver and King of Comedy are that movie's two. Well, Taxi Driver, the king of comedy, and like 60 plus years of DC Comics history are like the primary influences for the 2019 Joker movie. And the kind of and also the thing that I do genuinely kind of like about that movie, which is its production design, is like very Scorsese coded. He took a lot of Scorsese's guys, but there's a lot of Scorsese DNA in that movie. And so on almost the eve of that movie's release, we thought it'd be a good time to go back and watch a movie that, as I have heard it said, is like, what if the Joker was a good movie that came out 40 years ago?
Yeah, pretty much. It is, I mean, literally, it is one of those things where I watched this movie for the first time post-Joker because, unfortunately, I am a fraud of a film fan. Yeah, I watched this movie and I'm like, oh, Joker is even worse than I initially thought. This movie is so fantastic. All that having been said, Carson, what do you know about the king of comedy?
It is like third male lead of the Joker, of the movie Joker, Robert De Niro, playing a down on his luck stand-up comic in New York in the 1970s. The conceit of the guy is that he is somewhat popular, but kind of genuinely unfunny and gross, right? Like he is on the outside, a bit of a funny, clownish man, but on the inside, he's a pretty rotten individual, right?
Sort of.
Yeah.
Sort of, but no. I would say it is.
There's also
go on.
There's also kind of a bit of an inside Llewyn Davis element to it as well, right? Like he's kind of constantly struggling as an artist, and he can't quite get a foothold.
Yes, I would say it is more
for
of
that reason.
And it is a thing where, like, you'll kind of see it in this movie. The part of it is that, like, people, like, kind of tell him kind of frequently, which is another reason why I hate Joker so much, is they're just like, you're not bad. Like, keep working. Like, you could be pretty good at this, but you need to give it the time. You need to work more. You need to, like, polish yourself, like all that fun stuff. And I would say it's less that he's kind of like a rotten individual. And it's like, I think, the argument can be made that he gets there, but it's not a film where, like, secretly he's like a fucking horrible, deranged psychopath the whole time. It's more of like, it's more of film about how the pursuit of fame and stardom and celebrity kind of changes one, I would say, over time. But without giving too terribly much away.
That's probably all I know. Probably edited by Thelma Shoemaker, right?
That's a good question. I do believe so, but let me actually confirm that before I say yes. I think that's a very safe bet, however. And do you know any of the other cast of this movie? There's not
I don't. I'm sure that, like, when I start watching I will, but I don't think that I know offhand.
Okay, and you don't know sort of like if Joker is riffing on this movie, and if Joaquin is De Niro in this movie, do you know who the De Niro De Niro of?
Because it's not in this one. Is it not a talk show host? It's a different comedian.
He is a talk show host. He was a comedian, but but it's like he is like the variety show talk show host.
Okay. God, again, I'm sure I know.
I won't
the
give
actor,
it away,
but I cannot. I can't pull it. Yeah, don't give it away. Be surprised.
Okay. And then as far as editing goes, Thelma. It's a Thelma.
Classic Thelma.
Because of course it is. Is there anything else you know about this movie, Carson?
I don't think so. No, I don't believe so.
All right. Well, if that is the case, are you ready to play this week's game?
Absolutely.
Which is, of course, it is going to be the Untitled Letterboxd game. For those of you who are just joining us for the first time this week, the Untitled Letterboxd game is a game where I have picked 3 negative reviews for 3 different films off of the social media film-based app Letterboxd. And one of them is for the film we are talking about this week, which is The King of Comedy. The other 2 reviews are for films that are in some way, shape, or form tangentially related in a way that I find to be mildly clever. And Carson has to guess which one is for the King of Comedy, and he gets bonus points if he can identify some of the other ones, but he wins the week if he gets the King of Comedy. So Carson, are you ready?
So ready.
All
Born
right.
ready.
Review number 1, 1/2 star, reviewed the 14th of May, 2024. This is the quintessential, quote, rich person tries and fails to write a story about people who live in poverty, quote, end quote. It is so comically pornographic in its depiction of suffering and misery that after half an hour, the plot has already lost all its power to evoke genuine emotions, since the only thing this movie is interested in is to say as little as possible about anything. Which is a shame, because there is definitely a need for genuine stories about mental health, poverty, and loneliness that don't descend into pointless voyeurism. Maybe drop and this is their words, this is not me putting in a placeholder. Maybe drop the brand name and find a writer who isn't so hellbent on spouting the most trite boomer takes that he needs the protagonist to suddenly break character to speak on his behalf. That is review number 1. Review number 2, 1/2 star, reviewed the 18th of August, 2024. Why does one indulge in the pleasure of the phenomenon we call cinema? Is it to widen our eyes in awe of the larger-than-life set pieces and action sequences? Is it the idea of being perplexed by life's mysteries, yet somehow walking out of the theater with a bit stronger of a grasp on the absurdities of our existence? Or perhaps it is simply the comforting luxury of ignoring our problems for a few hours to simply have a good time. Well, in the case of this movie, any and all of these luxuries are either amplified or completely ignored. What we have here is a reminder that we are entering an age of cinema in which authenticity, no matter how complex, is replaced with shallowness. Why partake in a cinematic experience when you can feast your eyes on content? Why create new and interesting ideas when we can remind ourselves of the happiness we once had? And if we were to be reminded of this comfort, why should we even bother expanding upon these themes when we can simply reduce them to nothing but a crowd-pleasing cameo? The gratitude and pride that comes with creating a piece of art shall forever be replaced with the notion that it isn't what we've made, but rather what we own. Perhaps we, as artists, are doomed to parody ourselves. That was review number 2.
Okay. Well, hey, man, I really like your thesis. Cool. I read your thesis on Letterboxd.
Review number 3.
All right.
A sad loser gets rejected for being an unfunny prick. Interesting. After finishing the movie, I realized this movie stayed true to its name, as it is a massive joke.
All right. The first one feels so like... First one's like the Joker, feels like the Joker for sure. Or not the Joker, but Joker.
Yeah,
sorry.
see, that's an
Feels
important
like-
distinction
like,
to make. Because if
that's
you were on
true,
Jeopardy and
yeah,
you said, what
true.
is the Joker?
They'd be like,
You would not get the
Ghost
point.
of Alex Trebek
Literally,
would
you would buzz
kill
in
me.
and you would say, what is the Joker? And Ken Jennings would
Mhm.
say no. And then instantly somebody else would buzz in and say, what is Joker? And Ken would say,
Yeah.
that is correct. And then he would pause for a
God.
second and say, Carson, you almost had it right. However, there is no the. And then he would have gone on
No.
to the next clue. Anyway, that's how Jeopardy
Jeopardy.
works, in case you were wondering.
Thanks. First one feels like Joker really hard. Second one also feels like Joker very hard, but could also be a number of other things. There's not a lot of Joker-specific shit in there. Third one, I feel like your referencing of joke makes it like it's definitely not Joker, but it makes... I mean, so... okay, so this is my thought.
Yes.
Number 1, Joker. Number 3, King of Comedy. Number 2... Wait, when was number 2 reviewed? When was the review date?
Let me find that for you. Number 2 was reviewed on the 18th of August, 2024. So just last week at the time of recording.
Deadpool and Wolverine? Why so serious? You want to know how I got these? What if he said? What if in Joker 2 he says, "Why so serious"? We haven't considered that.
We have not considered that.
What if Lady Gaga playing Dr. Harleen Quinzel comes up to the bars of his cell, and the first thing he says to her is, "Why so serious"?
You know, what if Truly.
I'd be forced to give it 5 stars.
Honestly, okay, Carson, I gotta say, you got 2 out of 3.
Okay, great.
You got 2 out of 3.
I don't know what the fuck that middle one is.
Review 1 was Joker. Review 3 was King of Comedy. Review number 2 is The Lion King 2019.
Oh.
Another pointless rehash
man.
of a film that has the word king
That's
in the title.
so true. God, that movie's dog shit. Oh man.
What a kind of wonderful Letterboxd review for that film specifically.
I don't think Jon Favreau put that much thought into The Lion King.
No, that is correct.
I'll say. Yeah.
He said, remember when the birds flew over the river? We should do that, but in CG.
Let's do a dung beetle. Wouldn't that be funny? Well, damn, girlie, you got me. That's correct. I should have thought about that.
No, but I knew I was going to go with Lion King because of the bit, and I found that review, and I was just like, oh my God.
See, I listened to all 3 of those, and I went, none of these are the King of Staten Island.
No. See, you're wise to my tricks.
Well, that's great. I'm so fucking excited to watch this movie. This is also, and we run into these about once a season, a movie where I'm like, wow, I am a fake film bro for having not seen this movie.
Yes.
Which is kind of the conceit of this whole podcast.
Right, correct. Literally, the whole idea was we should start a movie podcast. And I don't think we've seen enough movies to really have any kind of an opinion.
Yeah. That's kind of the joke.
What if the whole thrust of the podcast is we need to watch more movies before we can actually be movie people?
That's the joke. So I'm so excited. Let's go watch King of Comedy.
Let's do it.
Get something on the record.
Okay, great. I love that. A proclamation right off the bat.
10:51 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. What is the date? It is
September the 26th.
Very close to when this episode releases. Because we're doing this very last minute because my schedule is very bad. Caroline Thompson, you, a woman, aged 30, is that correct?
That is, I mean, if this is on the record, if we're under oath, then yeah, I guess so.
I have here it is. A copy of Dune Messiah. Put your hand on that.
Okay, wait, hold on.
We gotta do it through the riverside. There we go. We both have our copies of Dune Messiah out. So you're gonna, under oath to Paul Muad'Dib Atreides, you are 30 years old, and you did at 10... What did I say? 10:51. Text me. Quote, DeNiro absolutely goated with the sauce. You texted me that, right?
I did text you that, yes.
Okay, good. I have no further point. I just needed everyone to know.
Look, yes, that is true. And guess what? I will cop to the fact that I used that verbiage, that in and of itself may or may not be cringe. However, I will fight to the death the accusations that statement is wrong.
Rupert Pupkin, not goated in the sauce.
The thing about Rupert Pupkin that I think we can get into that is very interesting is Rupert Pupkin is not goated with the sauce. However, Rupert Pupkin, I would have to say that Rupert Pupkin, at least in the performance he gives on the show, is certainly above mid.
I'm gonna say he does not have Riz.
I don't think he is not the Rizzler for sure.
He is not the Rizzler. He is not Big Justice. He is not any of the Costco guys. I thought his last name was Pumpkin for the first 20 minutes of the movie.
A very common misconception. It's commonly it's very frequently misspelled and mispronounced.
Yeah.
So it's Pupkin, yeah.
Which is a great name.
It is
a really good name. Once I realized it was Pupkin, I was like, oh, that's a great. And I mean, and they say it a lot. He says it a lot.
Yes.
this movie's pretty fucking cringe. And I don't mean that in terms of the construction of it or the filmmaking, but there were a couple of moments in this movie in which I was holding on to myself on my couch going, oh, don't do that.
100%.
Don't say that, Rupert.
100%. And I must say, this is one of those, kind of the fun thing about this podcast is every week we have somebody who is rewatching the film and somebody who's watching it for the first time. And I think that this is one of those films that upon like the very first time you watch it, because like we all kind of know, like going into this, like it's so famous, it's so storied. It's like Scorsese, DeNiro, like certainly one of, you know, Scorsese's most like, you know, acclaimed, like esteemed films. Not his most popular, not his most well known, not the one that like whatever, but like certainly one that like people are like, oh yeah, like I think pretty much all top 10 Scorsese's are gonna have this one on there somewhere.
Lost a bunch of money. Lost a bunch of money.
Correct. Yeah, it was not particularly profitable, but in terms of De Niro, this is one of those ones where it's like people are kind of like, oh, you like De Niro? Like, have you seen The King of Comedy? Like, it's one of his C-list notoriety films, but it is like one of his best performances. And so it's like we all know that going in, and we all kind of know the reputation of like, oh yeah, it's about a guy and he like wants to be a comedian, and it's like kind of a dark comedy, kind of a satire about showbiz, and it's like he's not that good and he kind of like is a little unhinged. But like I don't think most of us are prepared for how like for where this movie goes, and how like just kind of like, because we are dropping this when we're dropping this because it's about around the time that Joker 2 comes out, and like
that was the whole joke.
That is the whole joke.
The joke.
And it's one of those things where it's like where that movie is so, I mean, at least the first one is so blatant and so just like desperate for someone to look at it. The way this film is like actually in so many ways very understated.
Yeah.
And that is where the cringe comes from, because it's like it's so insanely well observed. It's like that thing of just like, no, we don't have to make a big show about this, because like Rupert can have like one of these lines that just like has layers upon layers of cringe that like say so much about his character and how casual it is, in a way that the Joker is like, you know, we have the most surface level observation ever, but we're going to scream it at you like we're brilliant. And yeah, I don't think most people, I certainly wasn't the first time that I watched this film ready for a lot of that. The second time, the third time, you know, on subsequent viewings, this film, like I luxuriate in this film. When I walk into it knowing exactly where it's gonna go, I luxuriate in this movie. I love this movie.
It's really fantastic. I love this movie very much. I will say just briefly, I mentioned this on our Patreon episode that we just did. I don't think I mentioned on the main feed. I think that I have been ridiculously busy. And I am a person who, as I have mentioned on this podcast, and as Caroline knows quite well personally, am so bad at time management. And I've been tremendously busy this summer. And, you know, now it's fall, technically, as we record this. I have watched fewer, like, full-length movies this summer than I think in, like, that 4-month span, than I think I have ever before. I usually watch way more movies. And not just new movies, but like I will rewatch. I do a lot of, I've mentioned it sometimes in the podcast, I've got a rotation of like 10 to 15 movies I rewatch before bed sometimes, or I put on and watch 20 minutes, whatever. I have just not been watching movies. And a few days ago, I rewatched Kiki's Delivery Service because I've been feeling
really wonderful call.
It's what I needed. Because I've been feeling like Kiki recently, because I've been so busy and so beaten down by life and trying to have a career. And watched most of Porco Rosso immediately after that. And then today watched this movie, watched King of Comedy. And I finished watching it. I was like, God damn it. I like movies. And I miss watching them. And I need to get back to them and watch more of them. It really fired me up as to just what friggin' movies can do. And what they can make me feel.
Yes.
What actors can do. Oh my God. What De Niro does in this movie. Like...
Yeah,
it is so well observed, to your point, and I don't want to draw out the Joker comparison too much more, but
We'll have a whole sidebar about that later.
When we see Joker Folie à Deux, we'll talk about it, I'm sure. Or maybe the thing I'm hearing about that movie is it's just really boring, which is
Yeah,
sad.
I can only imagine.
But it is, I see, obviously, the connection even clearer. There's a lot that Joker's taken from this movie. I would not say that it is like ripping this movie off. It is clearly
I
trying to
would.
be what it's clearly trying to be a loving homage to
Yes,
this
correct.
movie. I don't think that it does that well. And so, like, if Joker was a great movie that was a loving homage to King of Comedy, I'd be more willing to say it's an homage, and it's not good. So I'm more comfortable saying that it's ripping it off. But Joker starts where this movie ends in terms of characterization. Like, the first 20 minutes of Joker are like, look at this guy, Arthur Fleck. Isn't he crazy? Doesn't he have an insane relationship with his abusive mom? Isn't he just the wildest little dingbat you've ever seen that's been so topsy-turved by society? And this movie does not let you really understand the full depths of Rupert Pupkin's like personal brand of mental fracture until the last 10 minutes of the movie.
Right.
And
Right.
even then, it is very subtle about it. It does not come out and it's an incredible performance. It is very you said it was very well observed, and I think that's the case both in the writing, but especially in terms of DeNiro's performance. He is just doing so many subtle things with his vocal inflection, with his body language in this movie, all together to imply to you that there is something unwell with this guy. And at the beginning of the movie, I think you are maybe led to believe that, well, he's, maybe he's a little spectrumy, maybe he just a bit antisocial, maybe he's got a personality disorder.
Little stunted, maybe a little arrested development going on.
And by the end, it has fully moved into, no, this man is a narcissist, fully like narcissistic personality disorder, and there is a firm break between where he's at and where reality is.
Yes. And I think I'm going to try to hold myself to this unless we decide to do like a full sidebar where we vent about it. But like the sole Joker comparison that I think is like particularly helpful. And I think you can look at all of this, including like, you can take this and apply it to everything, including like, his infatuation with Robert De Niro in that movie, his delusion between like himself and his relationship with the girlfriend that's like all made up and in his head. I think the main comparison to just be like, this is why King of Comedy is very special and works really well. And why Joker is stupid and bad, which is the entire point of the film Joker is like, look at this damaged guy who like blah, 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 blah. Not to get confused with another Joker who has damage literally written across his forehead. But, and it's all about like how crazy this guy would have to be in order to like and how like society would have to fail him and like blah, 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 blah. Like, ooh, so scary, so twisted. The final monologue that Rupert gives in this movie, I fucking am infatuated with. Because it is De Niro. Like, this is a guy who has, like they say in the very beginning of the movie, like fucking Jerry Lewis and his secretary, and like everybody says that the whole movie, it's like, hey, you've got something here. Like, you are not bad at this. Like, you know what you're doing. You need more time. You need more experience. You need to refine yourself. You're like, you're new, you're young, you're figuring all of this out. And the thing that I love about that final performance is it's like pretty much every single one of the individual joke lines, I kind of feel like in a vacuum works and is kind of funny.
Yeah. Mom's been dead 9 years. It's actually it is that is the turning point of the speech for a number of reasons, but it's also kind of the best joke.
It's a good joke.
Yeah.
And it's one that's like legitimately been ripped off so many like thousands of times. I have heard that joke. But like the thing about it is it is just this thing of like, Rupert, you just need to refine your shit, which is that like every single one of those jokes kind of works on its own, but the totality about how this guy goes on TV and like makes jokes about how fucking like abused and abandoned and like he was as a child and how like terrible his parents were to him, like the culmination of 18 of those jokes back to back is really dark and really unsettling. And it's like this whole thing of like, you know, I do kind of believe there is this like thing that like any of those jokes could work IRL as a stand-up, but it's just like hey Rupert, like I think your like tight five is pretty good. It's pretty dark. I think you need to get rid of I think you need to rewrite it. I think you need to lighten it up. Keep maybe like your 2 or 3 darkest lines in there because like that's your edge, that's your bit, that's your like that's your thing, but like it is a little much. And I think you need to refine that. And like I think that like it is this thing where it's like the duality of that of like De Niro playing Pupkin as a guy who actually has some halfway decent chops.
Yeah.
You know, as a performer. Like if you saw that guy at like your local community theater in like whatever and like doing The Man Who Came to Dinner, right? At, you know, your local dinner theater, you'd be like, oh yeah, like that Pupkin guy was pretty good. Like he was pretty funny. He, you know, but then this whole thing of like the complete lack of awareness of how dark and kind of scary and kind of just like unsettling so much of this is says so much about that character in a way that makes that kind of like rewrites the rest of the movie. Like you look back on the entirety of the film that you just watched and are just like, oh, this 1 makes a lot more sense and 2 is like a lot fucking darker. And I think that delicate balance, that like super incisive thing right there, is almost more upsetting to me in some ways than Taxi Driver is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It was something, I mean, obviously, well, Raging Bull was between the two of these, so, but, you know, boom, 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 this is his third with De Niro. But Taxi Driver was the other one I was thinking of, because that is the other emotionally distraught, mentally damaged, you know, psychologically on the edge character that De Niro plays with Scorsese. And also, I think another person who is, in their own way, a total narcissist, someone who thinks that they alone can, you know, whether it's like I alone through my God-given talent of comedy can make it on the Jerry Langston show, or, you know, I can save this girl. Either way. It is, that monologue is so fantastic, both as a piece of performance and as a piece of direction. It reminds me in a lot of ways of the end of Killers of the Flower Moon, in terms of it being something that reframes the way that you thought about everything that you just saw. It lightly breaks. I mean, Killers of the Flower Moon is fully Scorsese popping through the fourth wall, but it is, that entire monologue, I think it is, and I don't know what your opinion on this, but I think it is very purposefully that Scorsese has been building towards this moment of like, not only is this the most psychologically real thing, well, ironically, I should say, it is ironic that this is the most psychologically real that this character has been in the entire movie.
Correct.
And yet it is the first time in the movie in which you are truly not sure whether what you are seeing is real or not. Whether or not it is canonical to like the quote-unquote real events of the life of Rupert Pupkin, sorry.
Correct. Keep talking about that.
So Scorsese,
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, so Scorsese, starting pretty early in the movie, and that's the thing that Joker rips off. I don't want to get into it, but it's one of my least favorite things about Joker is the way it ends. It's like, maybe all of this was fake. Shut the fuck up.
Yeah, let's put a pin in Joker entirely,
Get out of here.
and we can do a Joker corner at the end where we just, because literally my entire Letterboxd review of this movie is upon seeing this. I am docking my Joker review even another star, because like this movie is phenomenal. Anyways,
so Scorsese,
putting a pin in Joker in its entirety.
Scorsese does this thing early in the film. It is initially after, it's the opening scene, he meets Jerry Langston, they go in the car, they have this, and again, it's a scene that after having seen the end of it, it is even more frightening than it is when you first see it. When you first see it, and this movie does a really good job of letting Pupkin be a threat in all the scenes, like letting him hold a small amount of power, especially at the end, but you as an audience are never really afraid of him. He's never really seems like the kind of guy who could effectively hurt someone. And even by the end of the movie, I think you kind of feel that.
Yeah, I mean, the gun is fake.
Yeah, the gun is so fucking obviously fake. It's one of the funniest things that he has the line about the gun's fake, but it looks, he doesn't even say it's fake. He says it looks real. And then the next time you see the gun, it's in profile, and Jerry Lewis is terrified because he has no idea that this is a fake gun. But we as an audience see so clearly that it's plastic, which is a great metaphor for Pupkin's character, that he's, this fake gun. But so early on in the movie, that he has that meeting with Lewis, they have the conversation. You're starting to get the fact that this guy's a little full of himself. He's a little detached from the actual reality of celebrity. Drops him off. You have that uncomfortable first scene where they're outside the apartment building, and that Lewis later brings up, and he's like, dude, if I didn't tell you something positive, we'd still be standing outside my apartment. Then almost immediately we go into what for about a second you think is real, a cut forward to the two of them having lunch. It immediately dings in your brain. You're like, that makes no sense with the reality of what I just saw, because it was not Langston, the way that he was talking with Pupkin would not lead you to believe that they would ever get lunch or be friendly. Immediately, it's the first bit of incredible De Niro acting in the movie. Pupkin's entire demeanor changes. The way that he speaks is different than it was in the previous scene.
Yes.
He is a much more self-actualized version of himself. And then you get it's reverse shot, reverse shot. You get that long shot on Lewis as he's asking him to take over the show for 6 weeks. And then the reverse shot is De Niro in his mother's basement. Well, even that's a question. In his mother's basement, doing the dialogue for both people.
And it is very notable, like you said, that the performance between the two De Niros is completely different.
And it rings as the same character. There are elements in that, like, really confident Pupkin performance that do come out in him. It's the same character, but it's so noticeably different that it dings something in your brain that this is unreal.
Right. No, exactly. I mean, it is that whole thing of just like, in acting classes, they teach you, like you can't play states. You can't, you can't play quote unquote charming. Like you can charm a character. And it's like, that's what separates like a lot of like bad community theater acting from like people you can tell have trained, is that thing of just like, well, what are you trying to do in this scene? It's like, well, I'm trying to get her to like me. It's like, that's not a thing you can do. Right? Like that is not an action a human being can perform. You cannot sit in a room and get someone to like you. So you can't do that on stage, and that's kind of like the two things that I see going on here is it's like De Niro, Robert De Niro specifically as a real man in the real world understands that when he is in the scene, in the imaginary scene in the diner with Jerry, and it's Jerry Langford, by the way.
Langford, what have I been saying?
You've been saying Langston, but it's fine.
Sure.
But like, it's like De Niro as a performer understands that like, oh yes, when my character is imagining himself in a diner talking with this man, he is imagining them as contemporaries. He's even imagining himself as a bit of a power player. Like Langford is coming to him because he wants something. He's begging him for something. You know what I mean? And it's like so in that scene, when I played that scene, Rupert is in his element. He's being honest. He's being truthful. He's being a real guy in a real scene in his head. And then when we cut back to it, we realize that like what that character is doing in that place, is the place being his mother's basement, is acting out an imaginary thing for his own ego. And so it is no longer an actual performance of a man in his elements, having some power, being a contemporary with a guy. It is a man imagining an ego trip for himself. And those two things are very, very different. And I love that. I think it's so fucking good, that scene. And that is kind of like actually the first moment in this film that really ignites my brain. When well, I was going to say this is the second one, but the first one is actually when Jerry keeps trying to leave.
Yeah.
And he gets like, oh, Jerry. And he does it like 5 times. And like, that is the moment when I'm just like, man, these two guys know exactly what they're fucking doing. like with this movie. But then that reverse shot where it keeps switching back between the diner and the scene in the basement is like, that's kind of when I become, that's like the fourth level of the Vince McMahon meme for me. That's like when the eyeballs roll back into the head and the frame goes all red and my eyes start glowing.
And slight side note, but obviously, as we discussed, by the end of the movie, Rupert Pupkin is a much more severe psychology.
Oh, yeah, real quick, spoiler alerts for the film The King of Comedy, directed by Martin Scorsese. Go on.
Yeah, it was true. But he's much more severe psychology. But that early scene where he is calling oh Jerry, and Jerry Lewis is just desperately trying to get away. We have all dealt with a person
with
like
that exact guy.
With that guy, yeah. And it's not always a guy, but it's usually a guy.
It's usually a guy, but it can be a woman, or you know what?
Yeah,
it could also be a non-binary person.
Certainly. Yeah, mental illness it hits us all.
Hits us all, baby. Hits us all.
And that is so well observed. That is the beginning of that, both that character analysis and also that bit of funny for the audience. It's like, yeah, we all know somebody like that who just you cannot get rid of. What this person wants from me is something that I do not want to give them. But if I don't give it to them, they're not going to leave me the fuck alone. So maybe,
right.
As a bartender, let me tell you, as a service industry professional, every night,
girly, yes, I 100%, I 100% remember, and yeah, and it is just a thing too of like, again, kind of going back to the acting thing. It's like it is this thing that DeNiro as an actor knows and plays really well in the character, which is like, you can always tell when you are having a conversation with a person like that. You can always tell that you're not like, they're not necessarily being dishonest with what they're saying, but it's like their quote unquote objective in this conversation is not to like talk to me. Mm-hmm. It's like they are clearly playing an affectation, playing like, oh, look at me, I'm like charming, I'm charismatic, I'm easygoing, I'm friendly. It's like this person is acting like they are friendly in order to get a thing out of me. They are not being friendly. You know what I mean? And
playing out the conversation that they had in their head an hour ago.
Yes. And it's like, and it's just like, it's that wickedly uncomfortable thing of just like, you understand, like Jerry is like sitting there just being like, this guy is like talking at the idea of me because he wants a thing. Like, he is not in the room with me right now listening to what I'm saying and reacting.
No.
This guy is like actively like pretending to be friendly right now, and it's so unsettling.
Yes. And put a pin in this, because again, I want to get back to tracing the unreality.
Yes, please.
But there comes a point midway through the movie where Scorsese also starts tracking the kind of antithesis of the Pupkin character of like, wouldn't it be like just hell to be that famous? Like, isn't having that level of fame something that is so psychologically damaging in its own way? And isn't it kind of a weird burden? And doesn't it, by extension, then make Pupkin even weirder that that's something that he wants?
Yes.
But so that scene, Scorsese picks up on, it picks up on wonderfully as soon as you see the juxtaposition between confident Pupkin and Pupkin rehearsing this scene in his mother's basement. There is that juxtaposition between cool, confident, and, dude, guy in his mother's basement.
100%.
And then they pick up on the game of that scene, which then becomes, as the fantasy gets more ridiculous and more self-serving of Rupert, the reality pushes him deeper and deeper and deeper and further into the ground, and just builds and caps off wonderfully at the end of that scene, which is they get the drawing of the two of them, and he's like, "There's one mistake. He drew you bigger than me." And then his mom calls like, "Rupert, what are you doing? You need to stop." And you realize, oh, he's in his mother's basement. Just as he finally allows himself to live in the fantasy of, even I am bigger than Jerry Langston. Those scenes are then peppered throughout the rest of the movie. And Scorsese finds different ways. He doesn't and I think it's such a clean visual technique, such clean storytelling of doing the reverse shot, and now De Niro's face is at a slightly different angle. He's in a different lighting. He's clearly in a different place. He's speaking with a different intonation. We understand this is fantasy. But he then starts to stray away from that as a bit of filmmaking technique, but continues to put in these fantasy scenes because now we're seated with the idea that Rupert has these moments of imagination.
Yeah, I mean, I
But
think
it's
that
always clear. It's always
yeah,
clear what is fact and what is not.
well, right, because well,
Until.
yes, yes, I agree with you, and because it's like okay, so we start out and it's just like him and him in his mind, right? It's like we're seeing the shot reverse shot, and then it's him in a scene with cardboard cutouts of Jerry and Liza
Yeah.
that he has constructed himself.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like it is still 110% pretend. These are not real people. He is not really on the show, but it's like it's slightly more real. He's just like, yeah, it's just like, okay, that's 1 degree more. His delusion is now infecting reality like a little bit more. And then it's like getting him on the phone and like kind of stalking the office and like doing that thing where he's talking with the receptionist about setting up a meeting with Jerry, and even so it's all fake, it's all on his head, but it's like as the film slowly goes on, those delusions start a infecting reality a little bit more, and then b becoming the reality until we get to the climax of like it's like we start and he like shows up at Jerry's vacation home, and he is truly like, I have gotten to the point where I am like inserting myself in this man's life to make my delusions as real as they can be. And then he kicks them out, and then it cuts to the gun in the car, and it's like there's no planning, there's no whatever, it's just like that is the next step. And I think Scorsese does that really well, of like it is always Rupert's delusion, but it every single time we see him doing something insanely delusional, it starts to affect more people, and it starts to affect the reality more concretely.
The journey of the character becomes he is a person who believes things about himself and the world which are fundamentally untrue. And he cannot live in a world in which those things are untrue. And so he needs to, through action, make the things which are unreal real. And in doing so, the plot of the movie happens.
Yes.
That is also the scene in which, so then, yeah, as you're saying, you track that. There is this understanding on the part of the audience of like, well, okay, the bounds of his room in the basement kind of begin to leach. There's the two cutouts of Manelli and Lewis, and you're like, okay, well, yeah, he could have cutouts in his basements. He's a giant fan of Jerry Langston, of course.
Right? Yeah, of course.
Then later, the scene of you turn and there's cardboard cutouts of an entire audience, and you're like, that the room shouldn't be that big. Like, and it's just maybe believable. And then later you get the scene of him performing for the cardboard cutout audience. Camera reverses and you are on a different stage entirely, and you understand that this is fully in fantasy. And then after that you get the trip with Rita to the summer home, and I clocked, of course, earlier that's his whole offer to Rita in the beginning. I was like, well, we're gonna go to his summer home, and I immediately think, oh, this is an expansion of the delusion. This is like, you get that long tracking shot as they're driving through the countryside. It's beautiful, and it looks totally unlike anything else in the film because it's taken place entirely in New York City. And then they go inside the house, and Jerry Lewis shows up, and you realize, oh shit, this is real. Like, just because of the way that Lewis reacts, you realize, oh no, this is not delusion. This is reality.
Right.
And it all caps off in the final scene in which, and I think they make a really good choice of you never actually see him do any comedy. It's like one of the big stepping stones to understanding this guy is when, the assistant, Kathy Long, says, can you give me a tape? And he goes, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And he goes home and records the tape himself. And you understand, oh, this guy has never publicly performed.
Right.
Never. He has never performed for people.
Has never done like an open mic, has never like, yeah.
Yeah. She tells him the next time, like, oh, there's a couple of clubs in the city. You should, when you start getting in the clubs, like, let us know. Like, no, he has not taken the first step. And that makes him seem even more delusional. But the movie never shows him actually do any jokes. You never get to see him actually perform comedy. You can kind of live in a place where you're not sure, is he like, if he were to perform, would he be so terrible that he'd get laughed off stage? Like, would he be
Right.
just truly dog shit? And that is kind of the question that hangs over. But he, of course, believes that he is so good.
Yeah. Well, I would say, and this is just a matter of interpretation, or like maybe even just language, but like
Sure.
I personally wouldn't even go so far as to say that like he believes he is good, which, like, maybe it might be purely semantic, but like my interpretation is less that like, oh, this guy thinks he's good, and more, this guy doesn't, like, this, like you said, he doesn't even do the first steps. Like, he doesn't even like do open mic nights. It's not even one of those things where it's like, because we all have friends, like, we're performers, we do stuff at various levels, and like, you have your friends who are like at home musicians who like once a year do an open mic at a coffee shop, right? And
Yeah.
they're like, oh, like, I'm not trying to make it famous, this is just a thing that I'm kind of into, you know what I mean? And then you have friends who like every weekend they're playing local shows, and like everywhere in between, right? It's like, I get the sense that it is less that like, oh, this guy likes doing comedy, this guy is a fan of comedy, and more like, this guy is obsessed with that he wants to be Jerry Langford.
He wants status. He
Yes.
wants
He
status and
wants fame,
acceptance.
and he wants and
Yeah.
he wants and he has this like idol on his TV, and he's like, well, I need to
Mm-hmm.
be that, right? It is severely less like he thinks he's good at comedy, and because of like whatever American celebrity culture, or just like, whatever it is, he is convinced that like he needs to be that. And so for me, it's less like, well, he actually thinks he's good, and more like, that doesn't even matter. He just tells people what he thinks he needs to say to get in the room, because like you mentioned, like, he does not seem to have any interest in actually being a comedian. He is solely focused on, I want to guest on this show and then be famous and get all of my famous people, celebrity book deals, and get my own TV show based off of this. Like, I don't actually want to spend my time doing comedy. I want to get on the show and then be famous and get everything that comes with being famous.
And only then will I feel whole
Yeah.
as a human being. Only then will the delusion match reality. My high school principal will come and apologize to me. The girl that I
Oh God,
met at a
Jesus.
bar one time and knew when we were kids, like, then she'll love me.
Yeah, just, oh my
Because she
God.
does already, of course. She just doesn't know it yet.
Yeah, right. Can we talk about how fucking gutting the scene is where he's imagining his wedding, and the sermon at his wedding is,
It's
his televised wedding is the principal of his high school coming
mhm.
out and being like, hey, Rupert, I know that we all, your entire life, but especially when you were in high school, like, undervalued you and didn't think you were like special or worthy. And like, just so you know, we want to go on record in front of all of these people and say we were wrong. Like, and how, again, I'm not going to talk about the J movie, but again, just like how this film does something so gutting and plays it so, I don't want to say small, because like the spectacle of the wedding is huge. You know what I mean? But it's just like, it's just,
that's the most on the nose the movie gets,
yeah,
is
but
the
it
wedding
is the
scene.
most on the nose, but it is also just this thing of like, no one's playing like a crazy caricature, it's not like the high school guy comes out and is like sobbing or like sniffling. He just says, Rupert, we're all gathered here today to marry you, and I just want to say, on behalf of everybody you've ever known, but especially the people you went to high school with, like, we all thought you were fucking lame in high school, and we were wrong. And how gutting that is like his greatest fantasy, is like, not even, again, it's like not even this like psychotic power play where he like, kills his teacher in front of the whole world, right? It's just this thing of like, just like, well, and of course, like, as all of us know, like, the greatest the greatest joy in a man's life would be that his high school principal goes on national TV and says, we are all wrong about you and you're great, actually, and you're so special. That's what we all want, right? Like, that is the greatest thing that we could strive to, and especially if that was the sermon at our wedding. And that is so upsetting and hysterical and funny and like pathetic and
it's another good moment of recognition that it's not that what he wants is to be good at comedy or even fame, really, or to get this girl or to get the apology from the principal, but really all of this is just pointing at the same thing, which is that this guy wants acceptance. He wants status.
He wants to be seen so fucking bad, and not just seen like understood.
He wants people
but
to see him and like tell him that he's good. Because by the end of the movie, we realize, oh, this guy is probably got some underlying issues too, but like comes from a family situation in which that was never given to him. There was no validation at any point in his life.
Correct.
And he so desperately needs it from every other source. So, all that being said, we get to that final monologue. He's caught by the police. His plan is bad. It is bad at all points. You never get the sense that it's really gonna work.
But it does, so it's good. I mean, actually.
It does in that, but that's, I mean, I think that's actually kind of the thing. That is the, I'll bleep it out, but that's
kill the Batman.
The move that he pulls on everybody is like, he didn't want to, the thing that he wanted was not to kidnap Jerry Langston and get away with it. The thing he wanted was to get on air, and he did get that.
Yeah.
And he doesn't care what happens before or after that. But he does get that. So the plan does work in that way. And that's like kind of why it works, is because everyone else assumes that there's no way that is the thing he wants. Clearly there's got to be some other, angle here. The whole thing of like, look, we can trade a man's life for 10 minutes of airtime, sure, unless he starts like saying, swears and racial slurs.
I gotta say, might just be the difference between like the 1970s and now, but I think that's the least realistic thing in the world, is that a network executive would make any concession to anybody to save someone's life. Send tweets.
Oh yeah. Even one of their big stars, those are replaceable. I did get a real kick of imagining, and it's heresy, of course, but like if you do the modern remake of this and it's like all Stephen Colbert, and how it just doesn't work because we're in such a different culture now.
Yeah.
But so he gets his airtime. Police have him. He's caught. He is caught, and he's like, look, that's fine. Take me away. But I gotta, real quick, I'll show you where Langston is. He's right in here in this bar. And then he turns the corner and you realize, fuck, he's in Rita's bar. And it's been just long enough in the movie that you forget what the front of the bar looks like. And you don't know what the front of Mash's apartment looks like. So you fully believe he's going to get Langston too. And you realize, fuck, that's the last part of this, is that it's not just that he does it, it's that Rita has to see it. He scrambles over, he turns on the TV. And you have also not seen him be recorded. You have not seen him be recorded. You've only seen before.
Right, he literally comes out and he says, my name is Rupert Pupkin. Cut.
Yes. And so there's this question of like, did he start that and the FBI immediately like ran in and got him? Did they just not send it out over the air? They had already talked about maybe we'll just record it and can it.
We'll record it at 7 when we record the show, and that gives us 4 hours to maybe have a change. We don't have to decide now what we do with it. Yeah.
But he turns it on for Rita. The camera pans in on the television screen. It stays, the look of the recording is as though you are pointing a camera directly at a television screen.
Correct.
It
never cuts.
Never cuts, never goes. It just shows him do the entire monologue.
Which is so good. It's
a great monologue. I love that because, again, like I said, there's this question of, is this guy any good? There have been all these moments of like, well, yeah, he has the material. He has jokes. He has, quote unquote, an act. This dude who we've spent the entire movie with, what does comedy that he does look like? He starts out, he's a little nervous, you can tell. Body's a little swingy. He's hunching a little bit. This guy's never performed live. Starts out with the jokes about his hometown, which are pretty common fucking stand-up material. He's performing for an audience in New York, talking about how a city in Jersey sucks. Like, yeah, easy. Then he hits the joke about his mom being dead for 9 years. It is the funniest joke in the set, I think. It also reminds you as an audience once again of like, wait, we've heard the voice of his mother. We have been led to believe in the watching of this film that he lives in his mother's basement. If he's telling the truth in this scene, if we can at least assume that this comedy is real, then were all of those scenes fake?
Right.
Was
are
he
we
hearing
dealing with
things?
Are we dealing with Norman Bates, or are we dealing
Yeah,
with
like-
a guy who's making up elements of his life for stand-up, which is a very normal thing to do.
And there's the question of, well, and then immediately it calls into question of like, is this monologue, is this entire stand-up routine something that's in his mind? Because there is no reverse shot of people in the bar watching it. There is no other further crumb from it. There's no Jerry Lewis. You see that it went out live. We can say that something live did happen. You see Jerry Lewis seeing the end of the set. You don't know what he watched. Maybe that's the lie. Maybe the lie is every scene that you've seen before. And immediately you start picking apart all these things in the movie that up until now had just kind of gone by because you're so caught up in the plot, in the like. And at least for me, I start to think about the fact that I don't actually fucking know anything about this guy.
Correct.
I don't know where he works. I don't know where he lives. He says when he's having that conversation with Masha, you live in a high rise, I live in a hovel. And I was like, I wouldn't really describe his mother's basement as a hovel. He says he works in communications. He goes into the one building. What is it? It's like a media company.
Yeah, and the receptionist knows him, and he seems to be dropping off.
The receptionist knows him.
Like a note.
The question, and part of me is like, oh, is he going to go and he works in the mailroom and that's working communications? No,
Yeah.
You never see what he does. Does he have a job? Or does he just collect autographs full time and skim money off of Masha? Also, what the fuck does Masha do for work? You're like, wait, why is she doesn't live with anybody. She doesn't have a husband. She doesn't have family. At least it doesn't seem like she has family. And you realize, I don't know anything about these people. I only know essentially what Jerry Langston knows. These like surface level things, because they are not interested in divulging the actual truths of their lives. They are only interested in making their lives match up with the delusions in their head.
Yes, correct.
And as he goes through the monologue, he starts to get more confident. He starts to really get into the swing of the jokes. There is the line earlier in the movie where I believe it is also Kathy says like, well, you know the intonation, you have the rhythm. You kind of know how to deliver a joke, but like it's the material that we're concerned with.
Yeah.
And by the end of it, he is not doing jokes anymore. He is just talking about his abusive childhood with kind of the rhythm of jokes.
Correct.
And you are left going, well, I feel as though I know way more about this guy, but actually, I am now calling into question everything I know about this guy.
Yes, and that is what I love, is it's, it is this thing of, you can't believe a word of it. Is this guy, like, so traumatized that he's just like, but if I turn, like, my alcoholic mother, my physically abusive father, the fact that, like, I never had any friends in school, if I turn those into jokes, will somebody finally like me? Like, I can't cope with it any other way. The only coping I've ever known is, like, the most famous comedian in the world. Like, I am an American. I tune into the Jerry Langford show every night at 11 o'clock, and it is the only constant throughout my life. If I channel all of my fucked up experiences through that, will somebody finally see me and love me? Or is this a psychopath who none of this fucking shit happened to, and he thinks the funniest thing in the world is making up stories about abusing children?
Yeah.
And like vomiting and like being an alcoholic and like crashing your car into the house. You know what I mean? And it's like either way, and it's one of those things, there's that classic line about I think it's an Arthur C. Clarke line, but I could be wrong. There's the classic line about like, there's two possibilities. Either we are alone in the universe or we're not, and both of them are equally terrifying.
Yeah.
It's like there's two possibilities. Either all of this happened to this man and he is deeply unwell, or this is a guy who had some kind of psychotic break and is just like, I'm going to put a gun to man's head until I can go tell child abuse jokes on TV.
Mm-hmm.
Both of those in their own special way are kind of equally terrifying. And and kind of, like you said a lot earlier in this conversation, is like, it is the most psychologically real he ever is with you. It is like the one time when he is dropping the act that he does in every scene that he is in. It's kind of that thing of like, you're you know, there's always that like fun paradox when you're in acting school, if they're just like, oh, they're like, no, you have to like shed the bullshit and only tell the truth.
Yeah.
Like you can only tell the truth. Like you have to go out on stage and you have to be real and you have to be honest and you need to like relate to the material in a way that like you are conveying it honestly. And it's like, what do you mean by honest? Because this is a pre-scripted thing that somebody else wrote that I have never lived. Like I'm playing like, you know, this character who's but like, you know what I mean? And it's just, and there's that question of like, so what exactly do we mean when we say honest? And it's kind of like, it's just kind of that thing you shrug off in performance or in show business where it's like, well, you know, you're going out there and you're being honest, you know what I mean? And it's like the things he's saying could be complete bullshit, but it is the first time he drops the artifice of what he is doing in his everyday interactions with these people and actually shows up in himself, but it's completely constructed. It is pre-written. It is rehearsed. It is him doing the thing, but it's also the time he is the most comfortable in his own skin. So is that not, in his own way, the truth of Rupert Pupkin? It's great. It's wonderful. It's amazing. It's an 11 out of fucking 5-star movie. Like,
it's really great.
Let's fucking go. I love this movie. It's so fucking good. God damn it.
And that, Caroline, that is the reason why this is the king of comedy and not the
king of casual normal conversation.
Well, or the king of it's, we both said like this guy seems to be very particularly disinterested in the craft of comedy.
Correct.
This story does not necessarily need to like be in that space. It could be about a musician. It could be about anybody that has a delusional relationship with somebody who is famous and is pursuing that fame. But it's comedy because I think Scorsese correctly recognizes that is an aspect of stand-up comedy that is well noted. That you go up on stage and you try to form an authentic relationship with an audience by making up jokes that oftentimes do not have any bearing in your own personal reality. But just today, Hassan Minhaj did just today, he's back in the news. He's been doing a lot of interviews because dude got, I'm not going to say canceled because that's not what it was, but he did lose a job. He was going to be the host of The Daily Show until people called into question, came out that there were some jokes in one of his stand-up specials that did not seem to like stories that he told in the stand-up special that he told from the perspective of himself in the past that did not seem to have actually occurred or did not occur in a way that he told them.
Yes.
And there are these two camps where it's like, well, one, and the jokes were in the stories, I should say, because some of them were jokes embedded in stories that were about very deep, real things. They were about like racist experiences that he had, quote unquote, had when he was in high school.
Mm-hmm,
and it's like maybe a little, one can say that it is like maybe a little unethical and maybe a little dangerous to like use your like wide-ranging platform to make up racist stories in a time where like real racisms are actually occurring and people are calling into question things that happen to people. But then there's this other aspect of like, well, look, dude, every comedian does this. This is not new. People make up shit about their own lives because if comedians went up on stage and actually just beat for beat told the story of things that happened to them, it would be uninteresting and unfunny.
Right.
And like, where's the difference? Where's the cutoff? Where's the line? And like, that is what this movie's about. Is about, well, that's something that's in comedy in there already.
Yeah.
There is that question of authenticity built into the art form.
Yeah, well, and a huge thing happened, a similar kind of thing happened with John Mulaney.
Yeah.
When, like, he, you know, and to be clear, I want to say that the critics of John Mulaney through all of that are some of the most deeply uninteresting people on the planet.
Hey, quote, here's the thing. I'll go on say this. And I might live to regret this. We might find out things with all celebrities.
Yes.
We learn
at the time of this recording
things.
On the 26th of September.
It is actually, it's post midnight for me, so it's September 27th in Ohio currently.
Okay, great.
2024. We might learn things, but like when their concern with John Mulaney is, oh, he broke up with his wife in a way that seemed kind of weird. Maybe he cheated on his wife. I'm like, okay, that's bad. You shouldn't cheat on your wife. Does it make me, like, call into question the very relationship I have with his art? I mean, it changes it. It adds layers to it. The author is not dead, but I just.
But that was a big. But the reason I brought that up is because that was
Yeah.
what a lot of deeply uninteresting people had to say. Was they're like,
Yes.
well, so much of his bit is that he's like this like boring milquetoast white dude who just, you know what I mean?
Yeah, which is also not John Mulaney's bit. That's like, the joke is that that's not what he's doing.
Right, yeah, no.
Like, it's his joke. He's like, my parent, you know, people think that I'm a clean comedian, but I'm not. I just wear a suit and people assume.
Yeah, and he doesn't say and he doesn't say like the most heinously disgusting shit you've ever heard. But yes, he is very, very real. But no, but yeah, that was so much of the ire was he comes out there and presents himself as like, this is who I am, and for him to have been dishonest about that means that like his work isn't good and he deceived us. And I was like, y'all, I don't really fucking care, because those stand-up specials are legitimately hilarious.
Yeah.
And I don't really care. And if his wife comes out and is like, his ex-wife comes out and says horrible things about how he was abusive and treated her terribly and like whatever, then we can have a different conversation. But like, yeah, the fact that people were just like, well, the fact that he had all of this going on in his personal life means that like what he was saying on stage is not true. I'm just kind of like, I am the type of person who's like, but doesn't that make it way more interesting that like this man was doing this and was, you know what I mean? And
Doesn't
also his comeback special, Baby J, is fucking excellent. I don't know if you've seen it, but
no, I've seen it. It's very good. I think of the whole bit about the difference between your mom's parents and your dad's parents. I think about it every single day. Your dad's parents die and he starts getting weird. Like,
things that must be remarked.
Yes.
Jerry Lewis's performance in this film is incredible.
He's great.
Sandra Bernhard's performance in this film is fucking stellar.
The first scene she showed up, I was like, what is the thing with this character? I don't understand it. And then by the end of the movie, I'm like, I fully understand. I get this. And I think that an audience watching, because she was a very subversive comedian at the time.
Yes, correct.
Like it's I'm not going to say it's quote unquote stunt casting, but it's casting with an eye towards what her persona meant for the audience at the time, which is not the case now.
Yes.
2024. It's not what we get looking at Sandra Bernhard. But it's like today, if in that role you put like Patty Harrison or something, someone who's known to be very absurd.
Yeah. She is phenomenal. I mean, the scene again, just like it's just, this whole film is so well observed. It is so well written and it is so well acted. And it is just that thing of like, this film is very, very, very well observed, and it could have so easily, seeped into like just her playing like a fucking crazy person territory, which she is, but it's like, it's so unshowy, and it's just the way that she sits on the table and just keeps talking at him.
Yeah.
And again, like if you isolate any one of those shots, or not even shots, because many of them are in long takes, but if you isolate any one line where it's just her and she says something, she says to him like, I've never done anything crazy before, but tonight I think I want to go insane, or whatever it is. If you isolate that like 3 seconds of footage and show it to somebody with no context, it's just kind of like, what do you think is going on in the scene? And it's like, oh, I don't know, maybe like a woman's letting loose. You know what I mean? Like maybe she's a little tense about it, but I'm saying no, because in that shot you can't see him. You can't see him.
Yeah, no, and then you see him.
And that's what I'm saying is when you isolate any one of these things, but it's just how long they let these things go on for, which makes it so unsettling. If it's just, she's just sitting there talking at him for 45 seconds, the most delusional things. And it's so good. Like, she is phenomenal.
And that all he has to say back to completely set her off is just, you take the tape off. He does, because he realizes midway through the conversation, oh, I don't need to talk her into this. I don't need to do the work here. She's just following the script that's in her own head. I can I do think I'm gonna get crazy. That is, have you ever seen the meme? I feel like there's different versions of this meme, but it's like two guys texted each other, and it's like, "Hey, dude, do you want? Hey, dude, what do you want to do tonight?" He goes, "I don't know, man. I want to get crazy. Let's get Looney Tunes tonight." And the other guy's like, "Yeah, let's go totally Looney Tunes. What do you want to do?" "I don't know, man. Let's go Looney Tunes." And it's just two guys saying they're gonna get Looney Tunes back and forth. That is the exact energy that she brings to, like, maybe I'm gonna get a little crazy tonight.
I have no fucking idea what this meme is, but I'm happy for you.
I'll find it. I'll send it to you. Yeah, this movie is fantastic. It's really good. I have a
Why so serious?
connection that I
Uh,
want to bring up.
okay, let's
Let's-
round our
let's-
final thoughts on this
Yes,
film.
that's what I was gonna say. Let's get to the end of this because I have a thing that I don't know if you're gonna expect it. I don't know if people have. My guess is that this is not an original opinion, but I'm gonna say a thing that's gonna be a really long round the back dunk on the Phillips movie. But yeah, let's get to the end of this.
I want to say that I love this movie. I texted you, and at 7:14 p.m. Pacific Standard Time,
Mm.
and I said, "This is genuinely one of the best films I've ever seen." And you responded within a minute, "King of Comedy? Question mark. It fucks. It's a goddamn
Yeah.
masterpiece. DeNiro's next level." And then I said this to you, but I do want to get it on mic, which is, I hope he manages to break 100. Is one of the best. Is one of the all-time best just thrown off like joke lines in a movie, like blink and you miss it jokes in a movie, because like he's like, "Oh, he's out golfing. Hope he manages to break 100 this time." Like he's doing the big thing of just like, I'm just like, ugh, like, I know exactly what's going on. I'm supposed to be here. And the butler just gives him the look of like, what does that mean? Like
What does
the
that mean?
the like I don't even think that the butler puts together that like, oh, this man knows nothing about golf. He's bullshitting. He just hears that sentence and goes, "What?" It's just, but it's just like it's right on to the next thing. Hope he manages to break 100 at one time. This time is hysterical, and yeah, it is really really good. That's my final thought.
He leaves and he says it again when Jerry Lewis comes back in the room. But he like doesn't get it out because Jerry Lewis overlaps him and he's like, "Hey, did you manage to break 100?" And he like can't even get the joke out again. I really like when he leaves the station. I believe it's for the third time. It's when he's like finally defeated because he has the whole like, "Oh, I'll just wait." He has the like, "I'll just wait," and they're like, "It's gonna be until Monday." He goes, "Oh, wait," and you're like, "For 3 days, okay." And he leaves and he pulls an unwrapped sandwich out of his briefcase, which seems to be the only thing that he had in there. And again, makes you think, yeah, this guy's got nowhere to be. What the fuck else does he keep in his briefcase? His autograph book and his lunch. It's a great movie. I loved it. It got me going.
Yeah, I
Very
mean,
glad I
I'm
watched
just
it
looking
today.
at the IMDb quotes, and one of the top ones is, "Secretary, is Mr. Langford expecting you? Rupert Pupkin." Yes, I don't think he is. So stupid. So stupid.
Yes, I don't think he is.
Also, well, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, Jerry. So did Hitler. Pretty good line.
Oh, that's like, it's the kind of thing that somebody just thinks of in the moment. It's like not a pre-written line because it doesn't quite make sense. It's not 100% there, but the emotion of it is so clear.
Yeah.
Last word about this is that, I think we danced around this, but I did not expect this movie to be so funny, to be so much of a comedy.
Yes.
To have such a clear sense of humor. And like, I feel like that happens with Scorsese a lot. People do not. I mean, it was the Wolf of Wall Street. The whole thing. People are like, "It's secretly a comedy." I'm like, yeah. Did you watch it? It's very funny. It's a comedy drama. It's everything. That's why why many of his movies are great because they have room for everything in there.
Yes.
Full range of human experience.
I mean, yeah. I mean, we are talking 1982, so we're and like Scorsese is a name, De Niro is a name at this point. So we're not quite in the the late 60s, early 70s, like New Hollywood, like nobody had ever seen anything like this before. But yeah, I think the reputation of this film is that it was so groundbreaking and that it is very dark, and kind of the thing we've been talking about all night, which is like it is dark in a way that is underplayed, which makes it feel so much darker. The way that so much of this is underplayed, I mean, even comparing it to a contemporary like Taxi Driver, right? Like, you obviously think of something like Taxi Driver being much darker than this movie is, but like this film has now been out there in the ether for 42 years, right? And it's like, so people hear that, it's like, oh, this is like really dark satire. We're like, whatever. And it's like, it is if you think about it, but it's one of those things where it's like, if you didn't speak English and you couldn't understand what like the specifics that these characters are saying, you would just kind of be like, oh yeah, like kind of a zany comedy where like he takes a guy hostage so he can be on the TV show. You know what I mean? Like, so much of the darkness is like the undercutting, like one-off comments that like I think people expect this movie to be a lot almost like more menacing than it is. And then so it doesn't have that reputation of actually being like a pretty pleasant watch overall that has a lot of dark implications and undertones, but like is actually like pretty fucking funny.
I wonder if post Taxi Driver is a satire, but it's a satirical drama. There's not a lot of jokes in Taxi Driver. I wonder if post Taxi Driver, the fact that this movie has such a weird tone, as all black comedies do, but this movie really walks a tonal line. I wonder if that is kind of confusing to an audience in this year, if that is both just looking at the previous collaborations between these two guys and just what this is.
Yeah.
I feel like, I mean, obviously there is black comedy, there is dark humor all throughout history, but I do feel like the mainstreamification, if that's a word, of dark comedy now makes this a little bit more palatable to people. Like the fact that Always Sunny in Philadelphia has been going on for like 14 seasons.
Yeah. Oh, it's even longer than that, isn't it?
Mainstream. Oh yeah, something like that.
But anyway, yeah, I get 14. What you mean. Well, and I mean, I think that we can use this to jump into the other movie very briefly, but it's the thing.
I have one point to make.
Okay, well, I was just gonna say, I think it's because, you know, this film is so unconcerned with edge.
Yeah.
Which leads us. Take it away.
Okay, so I have one thing.
Yes.
And it's this one roundabout dunk that I thought about watching this movie. Okay, so right, and I don't know if this is true, and I don't know if either this is just totally baseless and I ain't got it, or everyone's talked about this and I totally missed the conversation that everybody had about this in 2019. So the outfit that Robert De Niro wears in this movie when they take Jerry Lewis hostage.
Yes.
It looks a lot like the outfit that the
Here we go.
Joker wears in the comic book The Killing Joke when he he shoots Barbara Gordon.
You are very correct.
And that connection made me think about how, the core idea in The Killing Joke, which is, I don't want to get too deep into it, but not a comic that I think is like very good and very whole, but also one that is very important and is a legitimate work of art. It's one of those like, look, the worst thing written by Alan Moore is still better than most other comic books, but also that's a comic book that Alan Moore is like, I was trying too hard to be edgy. That's not like, it's not my best stuff.
It wasn't really an artistic statement. It was more of a lashing out.
Yeah.
And that's fine. That's a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, there's a lot of really bad Batman comics, so like that one's still
right, that people tried really hard to make.
Exactly. And like, so the controlling idea of The Killing Joke and like the thing that it adds to like quote unquote Batman lore is this idea of the Joker's origin story is like, it's unclear, it's murky. That is a comic book that like provides a very clear, definite.
It specifically canonizes. Mm-hmm. We'll actually never know.
Yeah. The thing that makes the Nolan Dark Knight picks up on.
Yes, it makes the unexplicit explicit and makes it canon in that it spends all of his time giving him a backstory, and the very last page is he goes, or maybe I'm lying to you. We'll never know. Mm-hmm. I'm too crazy. I'm too crazy.
I used to think that my life was a tragedy.
You don't even know about me. But in retrospect, that comic book feels very influenced by King of Comedy. It feels like the thing that Alan Moore, I think, is more legitimately picking up on is like, I think there's a reference with the outfit. I think that Alan Moore looks at this movie and sees like, oh, that's a way of bringing a weird old comic book character into modern 70s New Hollywood and like using that connection. And also, I think he sees the same thing that we've been talking about of like, oh, there's this thing in comedy of authenticity and lying, and it's this inherent part of the role of the comic. And all that is in his brain, and he whips out a comic book in a weekend, and now it's very important, for the canon of this, the most important villain character in American history, maybe. You could argue. And that makes Todd Phillips,
Jack Napier,
which is now like the second bad adaptation of The Killing Joke we have, even dumber, because it's now just another bad adaptation of The Killing Joke.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, it's like, dude, somebody made this. What if?
Well, hello, beautiful.
Was King of Comedy? Somebody made that observation in
40
the late
years
80s.
ago. Yeah, very shortly, very briefly after this film came out.
Yeah.
This is 82. Killing Joke is...
It's like 88, right?
The Killing Joke is, if you just Google Killing Joke, you get the band. If you Google The Killing Joke, 88. So 6 years later.
Boom.
Yeah, I think...
Wait till they get a load of me.
...is stupid. I thought The Killing Joke was really cool when I was 14, and now think Killing Joke is kind of stupid, but brilliantly penciled.
Looks good.
Yeah, it is a brilliantly penciled piece of idiocy.
Have you ever seen the animated adaptation of The Killing Joke?
No.
God,
no.
Bad.
I don't love myself that much, but I don't hate myself that much either.
If you want to appreciate what The Killing Joke is, go watch the animated version of The Killing Joke, because it is like totally deficient of all the artistry that's in a book that I think is pretty mid. There's so many bad comic books. That's a generalized take in our current hyper comic book saturated superhero pockmarked landscape in Hollywood. You don't have to adapt every comic book. A lot of them are really bad.
Yeah, it's almost like when your business model is predicated on putting out 40 issues across 40 different stories every week. Some of them are bound to be bad, and that's fine. There's a lot of bad everything. There's a lot of bad podcasts.
Yeah.
There's a lot of bad movies.
Not this one, though.
Not this one.
Was
no.
a great one.
Yeah, this is a great podcast, I like to think. But ultimately, as Rupert Pupkin says, or no, it's not Rupert, it's the guy who introduces him, the guest star, says, but that is up to you. And I am saying you to be the listener. So with that, I think that is The King of Comedy.
Oh, yeah. So modern adaptation of The King of Comedy, it's about an influencer, and it's Jake Paul, but he's playing Jake Peter, and it's about social media and phones.
Yes, but that's the thing. I mean, like, not to go on too deep of a tangent when I literally just said that's the episode, but like, it is. Don't get me wrong. America has always been like a fragmented, like, racist hellscape where there's never actually been a unifying culture in America. However, in the 20th century, there sure as hell was a myth of one.
Yeah.
And it's just that thing of like, there is truly nothing nowadays that can rival the level of stardom folks had in 20th century America, because like we are so, for better or for worse, I'm not saying it's good or bad either way, but just we are so fragmented. Like, somebody who is the most famous person in the world to me, I go up to one of my roommates and ask, like, do you know this person? And they say no, because they're not into, whatever. I walk out on the street, I talk to one of my coworkers, I say like, I'm going to this concert next weekend. Have you ever heard of them? And it's like, no. And it's like, well, to me and my 3 best friends, like, this is the biggest act in the world. same thing too with stand-up comedy and late night is it's like, I mean, you can't do King of Comedy now because you couldn't make King of Comedy saddles today.
There's no comedy anymore.
Yeah.
They won't let you do it.
It would
They'll
have
put you
to
in
be
prison.
the king. It would have to be the king of blue hair TikToks. Am I right? The queen, the monarch, the non-binary monarch of blue hair TikToks. That's the modern remake. You couldn't do the King of Comedy today. Comedy's dead. Blue hair woke schools killed it. But because truly, I love Stephen Colbert. I do.
Yeah.
He's a little sweetie pie. He loves Lord of the Rings. Maybe I really pride myself on not being wrong and admitting when I'm wrong. So I like to go on record and be correct the first time. I actually think Stephen Colbert might like the Lord of the Rings more than I do.
I think Stephen Colbert likes Lord of the Rings more than maybe any other person.
Correct. That's what I'm saying. Like, I really hang my hat on how much I like the Lord of the Rings, and he likes.
I say that, but there are entire subsets of academic literary study dedicated to Tolkien. So I don't know. There's probably 200 people that.
But do they like it as much, or did they just study that in undergrad? But anyway, in the world in 2024, Stephen Colbert and The Late Show does not represent a unifying cultural force that everybody is reacting to. It's like my mom sends me a Colbert clip of listen to how he got Donald Trump this week. And I go, yeah, that's kind of cute, Mom. I listened to way better, way more interesting takes about this same exact thing on a podcast that 10 people listened to 6 weeks ago. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's just like there isn't that thing. So you can't do the King of Comedy. I think you're right that it is some kind of social media, some kind of content creator influencer. But then it becomes more about how social media rots your brain and our attention economy and blah blah blah. Boring.
If you are taking less the specific plot of the King of Comedy and more just the idea of a person who desperately needs validation and who is seeking it, and has chosen an outside famous person as the thing that represents that validation, it would have to be a young woman going after a Selena Gomez or Kim Kardashian or somebody who is
It's Ingrid Goes West. Did you ever see Ingrid Goes West?
It'd be Ingrid Goes West. Yeah.
The thing about Ingrid Goes West is it's
not as.
Yeah, and that's a decent movie. That's an okay movie, but it's just but also too this idea of when Scorsese and DeNiro are making King of Comedy, there are probably people out there thinking this, but it is way more subversive to talk about the inherent dishonesty of American showbiz being a cultural force that actually does anything for people. You know what I mean? It is the idea that celebrity culture and the things that are being sold on television every night are illusions that if you actually chase them will drive you insane. That was pretty cutting edge 45 years ago, probably. It is one of those things that it's I do think I think that idea is so baked into our current cultural moment right now, that you can't make that movie without being Todd Phillips'
surprise, Batman,
and saying and proclaiming with your whole with just your entire body how edgy you are to be saying this.
You know what's the other, and this is me maybe searching for a take.
Yeah, go.
But maybe the better version of adapting King of Comedy into a modern superhero movie is what The Batman does with the character of the Riddler. And literally that is the movie being self-critical of what the image of Batman means in modern culture for young men that need validation.
Yeah, it's what these guys are all and anybody who believes these things would have to be a bunch of fucking incels, so we're gonna make them a bunch of weird incels. Yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure. Anyway, that's the King of Comedy. Thank you all so much for listening. Carson, take us out.
Next week, we are doing a movie that it's totally not about the fractured psyche of one insecure guy.
No, we are not doing Todd Phillips'.
It's all part of the plan.
Nope, we're not. And I would never lie to you or misrepresent reality in the way that Rupert Pumpkin does.
Pumpkin, but yeah.
Pumpkin. God damn it. No, next week we are going to be talking about Synecdoche, New York, which now, having seen King of Comedy, actually kind of pairs better with this movie than I would have thought.
Something we could not have planned because
No.
I have not seen this film and you had not seen King of Comedy. But
Nope.
yeah, and truly, this is a film that I think has been like in the last 2, if not 3 films we have cut every season, like kind of since we like restarted in 21.
Yeah.
Like truly every time we sit down to do a season, you throw this one up on the board and it is always like, we got to guess, we got to cut an episode, or like, that's actually 1 or 2 episodes too many, or just like, all right, we actually, we start with a big list and then we just slot them into the calendar. And I think this is always one of the last like 2 or 3 from your column left on the board. While we have not mentioned that on this podcast, I am very excited to watch it because this episode has been literally years in the making.
True. I'm really excited to watch it too. It's going to be great.
Well, thank you all so much for listening, and we will see you next week when we talk Synecdoche, New York.
Thank you to Thomas and the Workmen for our theme music. Their EP, Good Company, can be found on iTunes and Spotify. How Have You Not Seen can be found anywhere you listen to podcasts. And if you like what you heard, give us a review on iTunes and interact with the show on social media. We're HHYNS Pod on Instagram and the website formerly known as Twitter. Keep up with what Caroline and I are watching on Letterboxd. Her username is CK Cinema, and mine is Fun Movie Zone. This show is produced with financial support from listeners like you. So, if you really liked what you heard, please check out our Patreon by putting HHYNS into the search bar. Over there, we've got years of content reviewing new releases and old favorites. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you'll join us again soon.
So serious.